My son looked at me across the dinner table, calm and composed, and said something that shattered the careful life I'd been building. Mom, you eat for free here. Those 7 words, spoken without anger or cruelty, just plain fact, made me understand something I'd been too grief stricken to see. I wasn't a guest in my son's home anymore. I was an expense. And worse, I was an expense he resented. In that moment, I excused myself from the table, walked into the hallway, and made a phone call that would change everything. Charles, I said to my late husband's attorney, I think it's time. Because I was about to discover that the man I raised had been quietly planning to take something that wasn't his. And Arthur, my careful, brilliant husband, had built a protection I never knew I needed. My name is Joan Wright. I'm 68 years old. And after Arthur died, I thought my story was finished. For 42 years, we built a life in a modest brick house in Cleveland, filled with memories in every corner. Arthur was an engineer, methodical and cautious, while I spent 35 years teaching second graders. We weren't wealthy, but we were secure. When Michael struggled, we helped. When he failed, we supported him. We never called it sacrifice, because that's what parents do. But Arthur once told me something I didn't fully understand until much later. Helping someone stand up is good, he said while we washed dishes one evening. But if you carry them too long, they may forget how to walk. After Arthur died suddenly from a heart attack, I was broken. The house felt empty in ways I couldn't explain. Michael called frequently, worried about me being alone. Then, one Sunday, he drove up from Columbus with a proposal that seemed reasonable at the time. Move closer to us, he said. The house is too much to manage alone. I was grieving, vulnerable, and his logic was sound. Within 6 months, I sold the Cleveland home, and Michael helped arrange everything. I didn't ask many questions about the paperwork. I trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? He was my son. The first year in their home was almost comfortable. Lauren, my daughter in law, showed me where things were. Michael insisted I relax and enjoy time with Emily and Lucas. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. Lauren mentioned electricity rates and grocery bills. Michael started making comments about expenses. Always light, always casual, but always there. When I cooked for the grandchildren, Lauren would say things like, You don't need to, we have meals planned. The adjustments kept coming until I realized I'd been slowly pushed to the margins of my own son's family. Then came the night I overheard the conversation that changed everything. I had gone downstairs for my forgotten phone when I heard Lauren's voice in the living room. Groceries alone have gone up, she said. 3 extra loads of laundry a week isn't nothing. Michael sighed. I know, but she's my mom. I'm not saying she shouldn't be here, Lauren replied. I'm saying we should acknowledge that it costs money. I stood in that hallway, unable to move, realizing I had become a burden in my own son's eyes. The real discovery came weeks later, when I noticed Michael collecting the mail before I could reach it. When I asked about letters addressed to me, he always said, Just junk mail, Mom. But one afternoon, I saw an envelope from First National Bank of Cleveland on the kitchen counter. My heart quickened. It was a bank statement, and it mentioned something terrifying: transfer authorization pending. A significant amount of money from the trust Arthur had established years before his death. I had never authorized any transfer, That night, I made a decision that felt like betrayal at first. I called Charles Whittaker, Arthur's attorney. When I walked into his office the next day, Charles pulled out a thick folder and explained something that changed my entire understanding of my situation. Arthur had created the Wright Family Trust years ago, designed specifically to protect me and ensure I would never feel dependent on anyone after he was gone. I was the primary beneficiary. Any major transfer required my authorization. Has Michael discussed the trust in detail with you? Charles asked. I shook my head. Charles leaned back thoughtfully. Then Michael may know it exists, but not its full protections. He showed me the documents. Michael had been making small withdrawals within his allowed limits, discretionary amounts that were technically legal, but the pending transfer exceeded his authority significantly. Who initiated it? I asked quietly. Charles met my eyes. That's what we need to discover. For the next week, I paid attention to everything. I heard Michael tell Lauren, it'll go through soon. Then everything will finally be simpler. I watched him reviewing documents on his laptop late at night, closing the screen when I walked in. I overheard Lauren ask, did you send it? When the authorization request finally arrived at the kitchen table, Michael presented it casually. Just some banking paperwork. Just need your signature here. I looked at that unsigned document, picked up a pen, and then set it down. Michael, I said calmly, I think we should talk first. Michael's confident expression froze. Lauren's jaw tightened. For the first time since Arthur died, they realized I wasn't the helpless widow they'd been planning around. When Michael asked why I was hesitating, I told him the truth. I've spoken with Charles Whittaker. He explained the trust structure. He explained that I'm the primary beneficiary, and any transfer this large requires my approval. Michael's face went pale. You talked to Whittaker? He said, almost disbelieving. Without telling me first? I looked at him calmly. Michael, you submitted a transfer request without telling me first. What followed was the most honest conversation we'd had in over a year. Michael finally admitted the pressure they were under, the mortgage, the debt from his failed business that still haunted them, the school expenses, everything. The transfer would have consolidated the trust assets under a new account structure that would make Michael the managing authority. Not stealing, exactly, but reshaping something that didn't belong to him. I wasn't trying to deceive you, he said finally, exhausted. I was hoping you wouldn't look too closely. That honesty broke my heart and clarified everything simultaneously. I made my decision that night. I didn't sign the authorization. Instead, I told Michael something that shocked him. I'm moving out. He tried to protest, but I was gentle but firm. This house belongs to your life now. My presence here has created pressure you're trying to solve in the wrong way. The trust stays exactly as Arthur designed it. And if you ever truly need help, we'll talk about it honestly. Michael looked both relieved and ashamed. Before I left his room, he said something that made me understand. He finally understood what Arthur was protecting. I think Dad knew something like this might happen, he said quietly. He usually did, I replied. Arthur's trust was never about money. It was about dignity. It was his way of ensuring that even after he was gone, I would always have the freedom to make my own decisions, to never feel like a guest in someone else's life because I was aging or grieving. The trust gave me the power to say no. It gave me the power to walk away. It gave me the power to demand respect when love alone wasn't enough. And in the end, That power allowed something far more valuable than any financial arrangement to happen between Michael and me. It allowed the truth to finally emerge. I found a small apartment across Columbus, close enough to see my grandchildren, but far enough to reclaim my independence. Michael and I talk now, and those conversations are different. They're honest. He doesn't resent me because I'm no longer a weight he's carrying. Lauren's tone changed once I moved out, warmer, more genuine. Emily asked me once why I didn't stay with them anymore, and I told her something I wanted her to remember. Sometimes, sweetheart, the strongest thing we can do for the people we love is to give them space to make their own choices, even if those choices aren't perfect. Here's what I've learned and what I hope you take from this. Families aren't destroyed by betrayal alone, they're damaged by silence. They're damaged by the slow erosion of respect, by the way we convince ourselves that love excuses dishonesty, by the way we accept invisible pressure until it becomes normal. Arthur understood something that took me a lifetime to see. You can love someone deeply and still need to protect yourself. You can be a mother and still demand dignity. You can be grieving and still be strong. The trust wasn't a weapon or a punishment. It was Arthur's final gift. It was his way of whispering across time, I believe in you. I trust you to know your own worth. If this story resonates with you, I want to hear about it. Have you ever stood up for yourself in a way that changed a relationship? Have you ever had to choose between comfort and dignity? Share your story in the comments and tell me, where are you watching from right now? What time is it where you are? Because sometimes knowing someone else is listening, someone else understands, makes all the difference in the world. Thank you for hearing my story.